appreciate all of their work. Thank you.
And can I say that Mr. Howard, Thornapple staff was there greeting all the kids, giving all the kids high fives. Everybody was so excited to see Mr. Howard. So they do an amazing job at our school.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay.
Am I on? Yes, I am. I'd like to make a motion to have an additional public comment put in right before our consent grouping for public comments only, as it entails to 3115A, which is the new Title IX regulations that are being discussed and recommended tonight.
Okay, we have a motion to add an additional public comment today. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay. I know it looks like we're a little funny today.
Yeah.
Okay, do we have discussion on that?
I just think that, and mine's acting up. We better move this. Okay. I think it would be nice to hear the public's comments and their thoughts on the new Title IX regulations that are being recommended to us tonight. I think it's just a good time to have it only for Title IX comments at this time before we do any voting based on the recommendations that were given to us this evening.
For sake of learning, Superintendent Kirby, is it appropriate to explain to us sort of in a nutshell? I don't know if people were able to see the agenda, what those entail. If that's not appropriate, let me know, but lifelong learners, right? I know we're all having fun.
Well, I guess that was part of what I was wondering when you say they wanted to pull out the Title IX, what policy they're referring to specifically.
Well, I think what I'd like to talk about, to pull out for the consent grouping is I want to discuss some of the things that are happening with the injunctions, and I want to be brought up to speed or just to kind of say what the current standard is in place and what the new standard is going to look like, and how that's going to affect First Amendment rights, violating our constitutional rights, and what it's going to do to our team members, our students, and our teachers, staff members. The regulation that's coming down from the Department of Education is in the executive branch. The changes that they have made are supposed to come from the legislative branch, and they did not get authority from Congress to make those changes. So what we're looking at here is a regulation that we don't have to implement, and I know based on some of the things that are happening in the injunctions, you have 6 federal judges that have kept the injunctions in place because they know that there's harm in there, otherwise they would have ruled differently. You have 2, and that's 6 out of the 6. You have 2 circuit judges, 2 out of the 3 that have ruled, and one of them represents Michigan. I think it's district number 6. And then in light of what just happened with the Supreme Court on Friday.
Holly, I think that what you're talking about would come up in discussion when you pull it out of consent group, and it doesn't have anything to do with having another public comment.
Right,
session.
that's what I'm just saying.
And I think what Kristen's saying is, I'm so sorry. You and I talked, and you're right, there were 200 pages of it, so it took a while, but I think these are more definitions and more how to handle an issue versus the injunctions you were talking about. I didn't see anything about that in policy, and it was a lot to read, so if I'm wrong, changing definitions to harmful, and I'm sorry I don't remember the terms because it was so much, but it just seemed like it was clarifying how to handle Title IX infringements with different names on them.
Yes,
So
sorry. So
to answer
your
you were the
question,
expert.
what I was asking was what policies were we going to
Sorry.
talk about. But to answer your question, the Title IX regulations that were amended basically included pregnancy for students and employees, and also sex, including gender identity and sexual orientation, to prohibit discrimination on those bases. That is primarily the change, and also with that, which obviously could potentially create additional investigations for a school district to do. But on the other side of that, it does change the investigative process, which will allow us to investigate cases and allegations more expeditiously. just kind of in a summary, that's how we are seeing them as a school district that has to implement these.
And I'm fine with bringing up the rest of the stuff I wanna talk about during, like, pulling it out, that's totally fine.
Excuse me.
No, I'm sorry, this is not time for public comment.
okay.
Oh, you can't hear, yeah, we're having issues with our with the microphones.
We can't hear you.
I
We hear you.
heard you, thank you.
Got it.
And we're having issues with the microphones, they seem to be cutting in and out, I'm not sure.
Can you take a recess and figure it out? We have a right to be able to hear what you guys are talking about in
Sure.
public. Thank you.
So, everybody just try to make sure your green light is on, it'll occasionally turn off, just keep an eye on it and pop it back on when it goes off.
If you like, should I repeat? Is that, we
Yes,
could hear?
Put it right up to your mouth.
I can take care of that, thank you.
Yep. Yeah, I was gonna say, if you don't mind, Superintendent Kirby, I know what you were talking about was a discussion about it, the policy itself. Went off. There we go. It was about the policy itself, and this motion is actually about adding in another consent agenda, or another, public comment.
Gotcha.
So why don't we deal with the public comment, and then when we get to the consent agenda, Holly wants to pull that out, then we can have that discussion. Is that fair? Okay, so we have a motion and a second for, adding in an additional public comment portion. Okay, can we please have a voice vote on whether we will,
Have we had enough
It-
time to discuss the actual
or
topic of that?
do people
though?
want to have a discussion,
Well,
more
that's
discussion
coming
on
up in a
this?
minute, cause I'm gonna vote it out.
No,
Well-
not, but on adding in.
Adding in,
I'm
gotcha.
Yeah,
trying to
okay.
figure out why we need public comment. That's
Yes.
what we're still trying to figure
Well,
out.
that's what,
Because we're not sure that
I
what you
think,
just spoke
I
about
think
is
what we're looking at
policy's about.
is these, when we had, Dave, come and talk to us about the things that come down from us for this to be put on the agenda, these are recommendations for us to vote on to consider.
Could you tell me who Dave is?
Dave Killups, when we had a class
okay.
with him. Oh my gosh. All right, I'm just gonna talk really loud. Oh, there it goes. Okay. And so I think this is something I think we need to hear from the public. It affects women in sports. It affects our girls in the classroom. It affects a lot of things. What used to be separated private areas is now going to be removed. That's part of what is going on with the Title IX. There's so much more that is in this that we're not seeing on the surface of this. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to hear from the public to get some feedback of how they feel it's going to affect them as parents and what is happening. And I really think what it is bottom line, Title IX is changing from protecting women in sports and education and changing the definition of sex to gender identity and gender expression. So I think that's something worth for the public to talk about. We probably should take a recess and get
Well,
these fixed. Okay.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, I'm just a little bit confused because I thought that what we were about to discuss was whether or not to add an additional, public comment. Now, are you asking for one just temporarily to discuss
Just
this one
temporarily for
topic?
Title IX, correct.
Oh, okay.
Just
I
for
see.
this one topic, and then public comments later is whatever else anybody came to talk about, correct?
Well, and I hear you on this, cause I know a lot of people have very strong feelings about the Title IX changes and whether they should be implemented or not. But what we are doing is, there has been a law that has been passed, and the policy that has been written reflects that updated law. Us passing that policy is merely an acknowledgement that the law exists. If people don't like the law that exists, they should absolutely then petition their legislators to change the law. But right now, this is just, the law is what the law is.
Well,
And public comment is
correct
not going
that.
to change that.
It's not a law, it's a regulation
That's
that's being brought down. And
It's
there's
not a law.
difference between law and regulations. So the law in place with Title IX, this is the regulations that's going to change the significance greatly of what is there, and I would like to hear from the public before we vote on. And we are voting on a recommendation that's come down for us to accept and adopt this as our new policy and throw out the old policy that clearly covers every child in our district and has a great policy in place with it. So the new policy actually lowers the threshold of harassment, so the sky's gonna be the limit. I would like to hear from the public about the new things that have been put in place with this. We are coming up on something that I think is going to change the face of some things, and I think we really should be listening, consider it. We have the power to vote this down, okay? Caledonia, actually not vote it down, but we have the power to table it and then discuss it some more. So Caledonia just did that recently. So this is requiring a yes or no vote out of us. And I wanna make sure that we have all the pieces to the puzzle present to us here. And I'm thinking there might be some people in the public that might have a little bit more information for us to consider in regards to this before we actually vote on making this regulation. It's a regulation, and it did not go through the proper chains of government. And we teach our kids the 3 branches of government. This did not go through the proper chains of government to get this to where it is today. And I think that's why there's all these injunctions that are in place, because it's the language that is in there that is, there's some of the things in there should not be in there. And they changed the definitions and they won't even start the definitions up. So I just think we should hear from the public in regards to this, so.
Okay. Do we have further discussion on this motion?
I guess just one question, just procedurally. I mean, obviously, I suppose we can do whatever we want at these meetings. Is this a thing that we've ever done before, or is there any precedent at all for just inserting a public comment for one particular issue before? I mean, is that just from a procedural again?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
It's been done at other school boards.
I'm sorry, you don't need to comment right now. This is not a public comment.
I mean, just objectively, I suppose, I mean, I completely value input from all kinds of outsiders. I mean, I guess objectively speaking, we have a law firm whose job it is to make sure that we're in compliance with the law, the regulations, whatever those things are that we would be held to, that has given this to us. I value the input of community members as well, but I guess what is the value objectively? I mean, is everybody that's going to speak to us a lawyer and they all have a differing legal opinion? I'm not entirely sure what it will add to. How am I supposed to weigh that against what a law firm is telling us exactly?
Good question,
So,
CJ, and I think Holly does want to respond to that. I just wanted to point one thing out, because it sort of came out, you said we can do whatever we want at these meetings, and I don't think that's what you meant.
Well, I
just wanted to make sure that was clear for everyone
Yeah, I
as
just think we
well.
have the power to do this if we want to. I just wondered if this is, yeah, I
Just
have
to
never
make
seen
sure
it.
that's not a soundbite that
Sure,
comes out
sure,
there.
sure. I just mean, yeah, in terms of adding additional public comment, we have the authority to do that.
So I guess I would say, I wish that, Holly, you would have presented this concern earlier when we had the time, and then we could have heard an answer to it in the weekly updates that we get. I think that would have provided us all a lot more information. We had the time to do that, and then we would have gotten responses back. But I suppose I would say, I mean, if there is more to say on this topic, the people who are knowledgeable about the topic, I guess I would want to hear it from those who are actually knowledgeable about it, because I feel like what I'm hearing and what I heard at our policy review was this is more about investigating issues of non-compliance, and that's not what I'm hearing from you right now. So I guess if there's really more to say on it, I wish that this had been presented when we were asked to give the question, so that we could have had, so that the district had time to get that answer and present it to us. And I would be interested if there is a lot more to say on it, to hear from people who are actually people who know how to interpret the law and can give us an answer on that.
Well, I think hearing from people who are knowledgeable, I think you are gonna be hearing from people who are knowledgeable because you're hearing from parents and how how it's gonna affect their kids.
If they're
Well,
interpreting
Well,
it
if they're
correctly,
interpreting,
yeah,
yes.
how they- how they think.
secondly, right, but secondly, you have 7, I mean, you got 6 federal judges out of 6, you have 2 circuit court judges out of 2, and you have the Supreme Court, which is 9, that are all pushing back on this in one way, shape, or form to keep the injunctions in place to watch this play out and go through. It's the language and the things that were put in by the Department of Education from the executive branch that overstep their boundaries to put in effect what we're to obey and did not get authority
So,
from
Holly,
Congress.
can I ask why that wasn't Troon's opinion then? Why did Troon say, this is out there, but it didn't really follow the right processes, and it's still kind of up in the
I
air, so
would
we
love to
should
ask
wait?
Truan that question as well. I really would like to ask Truan that question
Kelly,
as well. So here's
did
what.
you ask that question
That
when
was
you
why
were
we had a
given
week.
the policy a week ago and a week
So
and a
when
half
I
ago
was
and
given
asked,
this,
do we have questions in?
I attended a class today on a lot of the stuff that I had questions on and went through it and listened to legal, like, counsel on all the pieces of the puzzle and what this sets up for. I mean, you have change in verbiage on our policies that is greatly disturbing. It leaves this wide open for, for anybody, and when we go to discuss this, I can absolutely discuss an example of what we might be facing in this, but I think this is important for us to address. This is not a time, like, we gotta get this done in place right now. Eventually I'd like to motion to table it, and so we can actually unpack this a little bit more, because there is way more in here than what is being told. I'm just gonna tell you that, so.
Okay.
And I would just like to hear, I think this is one of these subjects that I think we need to hear how it's gonna affect it's affecting our kids. It's a violation of the Constitution and First Amendment rights. And I can't even believe we're sitting here thinking about passing this at all, or considering contemplating passing it. So I think that's
Okay,
where
again,
I'm
we
at
have
with that,
veered
so.
off of the public comment
Yeah, that's fine.
motion. But I think, but I do think there's room here for, if it's not public comment, could we get an expert opinion on what the actual interpretation is here? That might be more helpful than public comment.
Sure.
Well, and I believe we have gotten that from Troon, and Troon provided
Well,
that
this
information to us.
particular question was not brought up like it should have been in the last week for us to see an answer to. But, I mean, if we can get an answer, can we get an answer?
Which particular
Which
question are we
particular
talking
question?
about?
What Holly is concerned
the
about.
Title IX.
What is that?
That was a lot of stuff, so
Yeah.
what,
Can you like simplify and can you summarize?
Yeah, why don't we're talking about public comment right now, and I'm happy to unpack this during discussion, but if this is, I'm more concerned about what this is going to do. First of all, it's violating the process that we have put in place with the 3 branches of government. The executive branch is to regulate the law. The legislative branch makes up the laws.
Okay, that's you having an issue though with how this was done at the federal level. That's not what we do. We have
Well,
to.
we absolutely do, because this is something that we do not have to implement as policy.
This is
It's
my,
not.
this is my thought, I think it's synthesizing this, on the topic of, an ad hoc public comment session for a particular issue. I think there are no shortage of people in this room who would then get up to the microphone and give us their thoughts on what they think this will cause in terms of harm or benefit or whatever people's opinions are. I think there are people here specifically to tell us about that. Maybe not, I think that's probably the case. I don't like the precedent personally that this sets, that if a group of people just rallies for or rallies for against an issue, that they should just have additional time to come make their, opinions more public. I mean, what's to stop people from rallying against literally everything or for everything and saying, we want a public comment, you gave one to the last people or to the last topic or whatever. So I just don't, and again, I just don't know how that would influence my objective thought on the matter today. Of course I want people's opinions, we want everybody's opinions.
No, you don't.
we just don't know, we have no idea to know if the people in this room right now are representative of everybody, or I just don't know how the opinions expressed in a public comment session could mix with the legal advice that was been given from Troon. So now tabling it and getting more information, getting questions answered, I mean, I think there's room for discussion there. I just don't personally like the precedent of saying, let's just throw public comment on for subjective opinion.
That's what we're here for.
I'd like
Stop
to
the
say
public
that
comment,
I agree with you,
please.
CJ, on that one in particular. I'd be worried about a precedent. I would think what would make more, I mean, in my opinion, a better motion would have been to add a public comment there, agenda specific for each meeting going forward instead of a temporary, let's pop in a public comment into that. I also think that, Maggie, what you were discussing there would be, you know, reason for tabling as an option. Just saying that those would be options, not saying to necessarily, I mean, you could, Holly, change, I mean, make another motion to add something like that and see where a discussion on that goes. To add something in perpetuity, but, I would disagree that a temporary public comments would be appropriate.
So I think there's like two different issues here, right? It's the voting on an additional public comment temporarily, or, and this is not what you brought up, Holly, but this is not at all in any kind of order here, but, or voting to table this until we can get the legal advice.
Which is a discussion we have
Yes,
down in the
yes,
consent group,
yes.
right? So in terms of, again, just my thought on the motion of a ad hoc public comment session, it seems like we don't,
And I would
I don't know
welcome,
what purpose that serves.
based on this discussion and based on what seems to be a level of, I don't know if confusion is the right word, but whatever we have going on here, maybe there is room for additional information
Right.
that we were not able to receive in the course of the last week.
Well, and oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
None of us had any questions. I didn't have any questions on these policy ads. So I don't know why subjective opinions are gonna change my opinion on what.
Just be louder.
What our law firm has given to us. That is our legal opinion, and I'm going to go by the law.
Right, and I agree with you, but unfortunately, we didn't have this specific objection raised in order for them to respond back to us about it. Can we focus this back, let's get back on track here, and we have a motion for adding a public comment. Let's handle that, then we will move the consent grouping, and then we will be taking this back up. Okay.
And I just want to clear that if we don't vote yes for a public comment session now, that doesn't mean the issue is done.
Correct,
It can be brought back up
yes.
to discuss what we want to do with that.
Yes.
Which is what
Down
we
the
need to
consent.
do.
Right.
Correct.
We did the consent group.
Yeah, right.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to add in a second public comment on one of the policies, which would actually come up right now since consent grouping is next. So can we have a voice vote? All who are in favor of adding a second public comment, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Please have it. Okay. Then we're gonna, please, this is not public comment time. We're going to go on to the consent grouping.